Behold, I come quickly. Hold that fast which thou hast, that no man take thy crown.
So I'm going to put the word gay on the board in the middle. Think I should add lesbian too?
Yeah.
It's already there. It's already in the classroom. The kids are already thinking about it. There's ways that are pretty standard elementary curriculum across this country, which, you know, with a little inventiveness, you can start going on.
Gay and lesbians are the same as real people.
Should gays be allowed to marry? Should they not? What do you think the answer to these questions are? What I want you to do is have a discussion.
They just can't get married like that. I mean, one might have a disease and they want to get married and they won't even know about it.
Yeah, but a man and a woman could have a disease also like that. I think gay people should get married. Guys, if they love someone, let them get married.
I drew a picture, and this really happened to us. Jessica and me had just gotten a drink, and some kid came up and said we were gay.
Here we go. Pasha's moms.
I think that I'm a better teacher now because I know that in the classroom, I have to be here for all of my students. I have to affirm who they are.
Can't have two moms, she said briskly, but I do.
When I first started raising the issues in class, students would say, well, why are you so interested in this? You know, are you gay?
I've taught here for 22 years, and I haven't done a lesson around gay and lesbians before. It did make me feel that they are ready for a lot more than I had given them credit for.
Who really cares if you're gay? It's like barely nobody knows in the world. It's like, what's the big whoop?
Public schools in Fairfax County, Virginia are preparing to include gender identity in its curriculum for grades 7 through 12. The family life education lessons will include teachings on heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, and transgender identity. Andrea Lafferty of Traditional Values Coalition joins us from our Washington bureau to talk more about this controversial subject. Andrea, thanks for joining us.
It's great to be with you. Thank you.
First of all, tell us about this curriculum and the motivation behind it.
Well, it's interesting. The school board voted earlier in May to add gender identity. It's not a part of the state law. It's not a part of the state school board instruction, but they've decided to add it against the will of many of the parents. And so now what we're dealing with is a vote on the family life education. Now, while we're talking specifically about Fairfax, I think it's important for people to understand this is happening across the country. So I may talk about Virginia, but listen carefully for your own community.
Wow. Well, how will this curriculum impact the students?
Well, it's very interesting. Right now, what will happen is, starting in kindergarten, they'll talk to them about same-sex or gay marriage. And the parents will not be able to opt out. One of the big issues is in Virginia, parents can opt their children out of certain parts of the, quote, family life education. And so now what they're doing is they're trying to move parts of it from FLE, family life education, to health, which means the parents cannot opt their children out. And so we've been poring over the regulations and the information to see exactly what's happening. But we are very, very concerned that they are doing it here in Fairfax County and perhaps other places without the parents' knowledge or consent. In 8th grade, they will be discussing, let me just say, Bill Clinton's activity along with oral and anal. In 8th grade, and most people, and they've lowered it from 9th grade, or teaching 4th graders about the word incest. How far does that go?
What is the difference between sexual orientation and gender identity?
The difference between sexual orientation and gender identity is sexual orientation is who you have sex with and how you have sex. Gender identity is who you are, male, female. Are you born male or female? Are you born nothing? And they want to break down those definitions so you're no longer male or female as God created us. You're one of 52, quote, genders, or one of 100 and something genders, depending on who you talk to. It is not clear, and it is not a part of our normal cultural discussion. I don't even think it's a part of discussion in France or other European countries. It's just bizarre. And they want to force this on the kids in Fairfax County when in fact it's not a part of the SOLs or the required education.
What's been the reaction from parents, and what can parents do?
Well, in Fairfax County, it was interesting because the night of the vote on gender identity, the police, they hired a special police force, security. They actually locked 200 parents out so they couldn't get in, even though there was standing room in the back. Parents need to be very engaged. Parents need to know what is going on in their local communities. Read anything that's passed. Find out what they're teaching your kids under the guise of health, under the guise of PE or social studies or biology or family life. We're seeing just an onslaught. This thing is snowballing. And so we would just encourage you to protect your children and know what they're being taught.
Schools are being drowned in gratuitous and agenda-driven social programs. I say this 2 days after the National Post withdrew an ad that highlighted some of the details of a horribly intrusive and tendentious sex education curriculum proposed by Ontario's Liberals. The curriculum is redundant in that children know plenty about sex, too much really, at an increasingly early age. And it's obvious that this is all part of a greater campaign to force acceptance of certain lifestyles on our kids, as has been attempted and to an extent achieved on pretty much everybody else. The ads were strong, but fair, and far less harsh than so much of the propaganda we see from the alternative point of view. But intimidation and pressure can be difficult to resist. I always remember a woman called Michelle, then a member of the Toronto District School Board's Equity Advisory Committee. She had contacted me to complain about how she'd been treated after making some comments about the committee's draft policy on, quote, anti-homophobia. She said that when she raised even minor objections to this document at a committee meeting, she was shouted at and labelled a homophobe. I was supposed to interview her on my last show, but then she suddenly cancelled. I've thought about it over the weekend, and people have spoken to me. She said, I don't think it would be in my best interest to appear at this time, and I'm worried that my husband might be at risk. When I contacted the Equity Advisory Committee, we were told, Michelle is only a parent, she doesn't represent anyone, and she is singularly destructive. The Equity Advisory Committee had around 30 members, consisting not of a cross-section of society, but of invited representatives of specific equity-seeking groups. Now, 6 of the people were gay, all of them teachers, none parents. They and their allies were particularly anxious for this policy document to be pushed through, even though reports on race, faith and disability had been waiting for consideration for an extremely long time. So eager were some members of the committee for the anti-homophobia paper to be approved that they suggested that community consultation, listen to this, would not be necessary. Now, a glance at the paper explained the rush. Quote, identifying and eliminating homophobic and heterosexist bias in board policies, guidelines and day-to-day operations, protocols and practices, deep breath, ensuring that educational practices in all grades are inclusive and reflect the contributions of the diverse lesbian and gay communities and other communities of people who identify themselves on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity, and that all forms of stereotyping, prejudice and discrimination against these communities are challenged and removed. Sorry, I was getting carried away. Ensuring that principles of anti-homophobia and sexual orientation equity permeate the curriculum, I'm not making this up, in all subject areas and all grade levels. And the removal of all materials and perhaps people who exhibit traces of the terrible sin of heterosexism. This is all true. Now, according to critics, The policy would mean that as early as junior kindergarten, all children had to be taught that it was entirely natural for Jimmy or Sally to have two mums or two dads. And what was so disturbing about this story is that opponents of the policy seemed intimidated and frightened of speaking out. Now, in free and open Canada, that is. The campaign against the Ontario Liberal sex ed nonsense seems to have found itself against similar aggression, and even when it pays for ads outlining its position. You know, there are none so intolerant as those who claim to support tolerance.
Hello, I'm Todd Starnes. A school district in Maine is teaching 5-year-old boys and girls about transgenderism. One teacher at Horace Mitchell Primary School read a book to the children called I Am Jazz. It's the story about a young child with a boy's body but a girl's brain. The transgender story time was part of a lesson on tolerance and acceptance. Parents say they were not informed until after the fact. And one very irate mom reached out to my colleague, Sean Hannity, firing off an email that reads in part, I feel like my thoughts, feelings, and beliefs were completely ignored. My right as a parent to allow or not allow this discussion with my child was taken from me. Well, the school district has apologized. They say they regret not notifying parents, calling it an oversight, which is a load of bull. This is an example of a school district circumventing the rights and preferences of moms and dads, and it is a direct attack on the family. In what world do people think it's okay for teachers to discuss transgenderism with a bunch of 5-year-olds? Maybe, just maybe, they ought to stick to teaching the kids how to read and write instead of deconstructing their God-given gender identity. And whatever happened to reading an old-fashioned nursery rhyme? You know, back when I was in school, Jack and Jill went up the hill, but today, when Jack came down, he was wearing Jill's dress and going by the name Jackie. And Lord only knows what the rub-a-dub-dub 3 men in a tub are doing.
We are back now at 7:42, and there's a controversial decision being made by some school administrators. Bathrooms shared by both boys and girls. NBC's Joe Fryer has the story.
Once separate, those infamous stick figures have come together at Mira Loma Elementary in San Francisco. The school now has gender-neutral restrooms, a response to the ongoing discussion about gender identity.
You want to make every student feel like they're included and part of the community and safe and secure. So I would hope that this is the wave of the future.
This first grade classroom has 2 bathrooms. This one used to be just for girls, and the one over here used to be marked just for boys. Now any student can use either one. The change is only happening for now in kindergarten and first grade, where the restrooms have a single stall, so just one student can use them at a time.
There's an impression that we will have all types of students in our restrooms using the bathroom at the same time, and that's just simply not the case.
When your children found out about this, what was their reaction?
They were very excited. They were really happy about it.
Gedalia Braverman has twins, first graders Ari and Ella. Ari is gender non-conforming, which means his gender is considered fluid. He prefers male pronouns and usually dresses like a boy, but not always.
I think that
Ari likes the gender-neutral bathrooms.
then it's nicer. You don't have to separate people.
Having both a male and female symbol on a single door, what difference does that make?
I think it invites the child and invites the person into the space as opposed to putting them into a moment of confusion or anxiety.
In this San Francisco community, the school's change is met with support, but across the country, restrooms have become a battleground when it comes to gender identity. This week in Hillsborough, Missouri, many students walked out in protest, upset a transgender female can use the girls' bathrooms in locker rooms. And in Troy, Ohio, when school officials ordered every school to designate a gender-neutral restroom, parents were divided.
And I do not think it's a good idea for them to share bathrooms.
Meanwhile, the White House added a gender-neutral bathroom this year, and many colleges are doing the same as the discussion ramps up over this sign of the times. For Today, Joe Fryer, NBC News, San Francisco.
A shocking new policy in Oregon would allow 15-year-olds to have sex change procedures without their parents even knowing about it.
And as Fox News correspondent Dan Springer reports, it's all on your dime.
Heather and Ainsley, with no public debate, the state of Oregon in January began covering the cost of puberty-suppressing drugs and sex change operations for people enrolled in their Medicaid program. Children as young as 15 years old can have this done even without their parents' consent. The American Psychiatric Association classifies gender dysphoria as a mental disorder in which a person identifies as the sex opposite of his or her birth. A 2008 study found that the vast majority of children with gender dysphoria grow out of it after puberty. But a transgender activist in Portland who had a sex change operation says the new policy will save lives through suicide prevention. She defends the young age it's available and keeping some parents in the dark.
Parents may not be supportive. They may not be in an environment where they feel the parent will affirm their identity, and this may have been going on for years.
15 is the age of medical consent in Oregon, but kids there still can't drive, give blood, or get a tattoo. The Oregon Health Authority declined a request for an on-camera interview. The former head of psychiatry at Johns Hopkins called Oregon's new policy a form of child abuse, and parents groups, when they finally learned of it, were outraged.
It is trespassing on the hearts, the minds, and the bodies of our children. They're our children. And for a decision, a life-altering decision like that to be done unbeknownst to a parent or a guardian it's mind-boggling.
Oregon officials can't say how many children have been treated for gender dysphoria since January. They project the cost of this to be about $150,000 a year. Heather, Ainsley.
Wow, Dan Springer, thank you.
Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. Seek the Lord.
He which testifieth these things saith, Surely I come quickly. Amen. Even so, come, Lord Jesus.